History is filled with stories too strange to believe. Moments when greed, folly, and human pride shaped the fate of nations. A flower once cost more than a mansion. A modern army declared war on birds and lost. The poor were locked away in stone prisons called workhouses, punished for their poverty. These are not legends. They are true stories, echoes of the past that still haunt us today. The flower that broke an economy. It's winter in Amsterdam, 1636. A wealthy merchant sits at a long wooden table in a candlelit hall. In front of him lies a sheet of parchment, his deed to a grand canal house. Across from him, another man waits with trembling hands. He holds not gold, not land, not a chest of spices, but a small, dirt-crusted object, a tulip bulb. The merchant pushes the deed forward. The other man places the bulb gently on the table, as though it were a crown jewel. Quills scratch, witnesses murmur, and just like that, a house has been traded for a flower. How could a flower become worth more than a mansion? To answer that, we must step back into the Dutch Golden Age. In the 17th century, the Netherlands was the beating heart of global trade. Ships from the Dutch East India Company carried spices, porcelain, silk, and treasures from every corner of the world. Amsterdam's canals bustled with merchants, bankers, and adventurers. Wealth poured in so fast that a new middle class emerged, eager to display its fortune. And then came the tulip. Introduced from the Ottoman Empire, tulips were unlike anything the Dutch had ever seen. Fiery reds, deep purples, brilliant yellows. Their petals flamed like painted glass. But what made them irresistible were the rare, broken tulips, streaked with dramatic patterns caused by a virus no one yet understood. Each bloom looked like a miracle. Owning such a flower became a mark of prestige. For the rising middle class, a tulip wasn't just a plant, it was proof of status, beauty, and power. Soon, speculation began. Merchants and artisans traded bulbs as if they were coins. A single rare bulb could fetch enough to feed a family for years. Contracts were drawn up promising delivery months in the future. People began buying and selling bulbs they had never even seen, gambling that prices would only rise. The taverns of Amsterdam buzzed with deals. A weaver might trade his loom for a bulb. A sailor fresh from sea might risk his pay on a contract. By 1636, even the wealthy elite were caught in the fever. Prices soared higher and higher. A single Semper Augustus tulip became so valuable that its worth rivaled a grand house on the canal. But beneath the frenzy, a question lingered like a shadow. What happens when everyone realizes the tulip is just a flower? The cracks began small. A few buyers hesitated to honor their contracts. A merchant's promise to pay tomorrow no longer felt certain today. Rumors spread through taverns. Someone had tried to auction their bulbs and no one had offered a bid. Panic whispered through the market. The same men who once boasted of fortunes now rushed to sell, desperate to escape before the collapse. But the more they tried, the faster prices fell. The bulb that had once been worth a house was now worth a sack of onions. Families who had staked everything were ruined. Debts crushed merchants. Ordinary craftsmen lost their livelihoods. The same flower that symbolized beauty had become a symbol of greed and folly. In the span of weeks, the greatest economic bubble of the age had burst, and yet the allure of Tulip Mania never truly died. The story of those bulbs, traded like treasure and discarded like weeds, would echo across centuries, warning of every future bubble to come. When the bubble burst, it is a bitter February night in the 1637. The tavern in Haarlem is packed, the air thick with smoke and sweat. Men jostle at long oak tables, contracts and coins spilling across the wood. A bulb changes hands for a promised sum. Delivery in spring. Payment due now. But something is different tonight. One man refuses to pay, then another. Laughter turns to shouting. Fists slam on the table. "I'll not pay for a flower," someone roars. The crowd grows restless. Papers are torn in half, ink-stained promises worth nothing in the flicker of candlelight. Who lost everything when the market crashed overnight? By dawn, word spreads through Haarlem, then to Amsterdam, then across the Dutch Republic. Buyers vanish. Contracts collapse. What was fortune yesterday is folly today. A wealthy merchant who once traded a canal house for bulbs now faces ruin. His neighbors whisper. His wife hides her face. He is not alone. Bakers, brewers, carpenters, men who gambled their savings on tulips are crushed under debts they can never repay. In Leiden, a man who boasted of buying 40 bulbs for the price of a mansion now cannot sell them for the price of a loaf of bread. In Alkmaar, a sailor returns from sea to find his wages gone, squandered on a contract that no longer holds value. Across the land, taverns once buzzing with speculation now sit in uneasy silence. The Dutch courts are dragged into the chaos. Angry investors demand repayment, but the judges hesitate. Were tulip contracts legitimate trade or mere gambling? Rulings vary. Some debts are forgiven, others are enforced. Confusion reigns. No law had ever prepared for a bubble built on flowers. Fortunes vanish in weeks. Reputations crumble. The proud golden age reveals its darker side: greed, folly, and despair. And yet, in the ashes of the Tulip Mania, another question emerges. Why did this madness happen again and again in history? In stocks, housing, even crypto? Centuries after tulip bulbs lost their luster, the pattern repeats. The South Sea bubble in 1720 sweeps across England, fueled by wild speculation in a company promising impossible riches. In 1929, Wall Street roars with unchecked optimism until the crash drags the world into depression. In the 21st century, houses in America are bought and sold on loans destined to fail, ending in the crash of 2008. And now, digital coins without weight or substance rise to dizzying heights before plunging to nothing. The rhythm is always the same: a spark of novelty, a frenzy of desire, prices soaring far beyond reason, and then the cold return to reality. What tulips taught the world was not about flowers at all. It was about people, their dreams, their fears, their endless belief that they could beat the odds. The bulb in the ground was worthless until humans decided it was treasure. And when belief cracked, treasure turned back into dirt. In that Harlem tavern, the shouting fades. The men look down at their broken contracts, their empty purses. A flower lies forgotten on the floor, trampled under muddy boots. The lesson is clear. Though it will be ignored, every age will have its tulips. And every bubble, no matter how bright, will one day burst. Australia's strangest enemy. The scrubland is quiet under a blazing Western Australian sun. Soldiers crouch low, their fingers on the triggers of Lewis machine guns. Sweat trickles down their necks. Dust clings to their boots. They wait for the enemy to appear. But this is no battlefield of men. No opposing army waits beyond the scrub. Instead, the horizon ripples with movement. Hundreds of tall, dark shapes sprinting across the land. Their heads bob in the heat haze, their legs kicking up dust. Emu. A sergeant squints, raises his hand, and gives the signal. The guns rattle, bullets cutting through the dry air. Birds scatter in every direction, feathers flying, dust clouds rising. When the shooting stops, the ground is empty. Not one bird lies still. The soldiers stare in disbelief. Why did a modern army declare war on emus? To understand, we rewind a decade. It is the late 1920s, and Australia is still scarred from the Great War. Thousands of soldiers have returned home, promised land in Western Australia to start anew as farmers. They clear the scrub, sow wheat, and try to build lives from the dust. But farming here is no easy task. Drought bites hard. Prices for wheat collapse during the Great Depression. And then comes the final insult: emus. Every year after breeding season, tens of thousands of emus migrate from the inland toward the coast, searching for food and water. In 1932, they discover the farmers' fields. Waves of giant birds descend, tearing through crops. Wheat vanishes in days. Fences buckle. The farmers are powerless. Desperate, they turn to the government. They ask for help, not with subsidies, not with relief, but with guns. The army, they insist, must be deployed against the birds. At first, the request sounds absurd, but the cries grow louder. Farmers are veterans themselves, men who once fought under the Australian flag. If they could march to the trenches of Europe, Why should the government not march against the emus now threatening their survival? And so, in November 1932, the military agrees. Soldiers with machine guns are dispatched to the wheat belt. A war is declared against birds. The soldiers wait again in the scrub. The flock reappears tall and fast, their powerful legs carrying them across the fields like shadows. The order is given. Gunfire erupts. This time one bird stumbles, another collapses, but the rest scatter, darting in zigzags too quick for the gunners to follow. The men reload, but the birds are already gone. Silence returns to the land. The soldiers exchange glances, uneasy. Could machine guns really defeat thousands of fast, stubborn birds? The first reports from the front lines are embarrassing. Ammunition wasted, but the flocks remain. Soldiers describe the birds as if they were trained guerrilla fighters, splitting into smaller groups, vanishing into the brush, regrouping miles away. The newspapers seize on the story. Headlines mock the government. Army outgunned by birds. Farmers grow furious. Politicians squirm. The military insists the campaign will continue, but the birds keep coming. Day after day, the soldiers chase them, firing burst after burst. Yet for every emu that falls, hundreds more thunder across the wheat fields. The men begin to realize the scale of their task. This is no ordinary war. This is a battle against nature itself, unyielding, relentless, and absurd. And as the days drag on, one truth becomes clear. The emus are not losing. How the birds won. The guns roar again. Dust billows across the scrubland. Soldiers squint through the haze, spraying bullets at the charging flock. Dozens of emus scatter, their long legs carrying them faster than the gunfire. The men reload, firing again. Dust, feathers, chaos. And yet, when the smoke clears, the birds are gone. Not dead, gone. The sergeant curses. Another wasted barrage. The soldiers wipe sweat from their brows. They've fired thousands of rounds, but the emus still roam the wheat belt. It feels less like a battle, more like a farce. Did the army actually lose a war against birds? By mid-November 1932, the press seizes the story. Newspapers across Australia mock the campaign. Headlines read, "Military outmaneuvered by birds," and "Machine guns no match for emus." Journalists describe the enemy as cunning, almost supernatural. The birds split into small groups, outflanking the soldiers, vanishing into the scrub like trained soldiers. For farmers, the news is no joke. Crops continue to vanish under the birds' relentless assault. But for city dwellers, the story becomes entertainment. The idea of battle-hardened veterans, once sent against the German army, now failing against giant birds, is too absurd to ignore. Politicians squirm under the embarrassment. The government had promised quick relief, but now faces ridicule. The opposition mocks the prime minister. Why, they ask, is the army wasting time and bullets chasing birds? Why are soldiers with medals from the Great War failing against creatures with feathers? The military insists the campaign is working. Reports claim hundreds of birds killed, but the truth on the ground is humiliating. After weeks of fighting, fewer than 1,000 emus lie dead. Tens of thousands still roam freely. The soldiers themselves begin to feel the absurdity. One officer jokes bitterly that the birds seem immune to bullets. Another writes in his report, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world." Behind the humor is frustration. Farmers grow desperate. The wheat belt remains overrun. And the soldiers, their pride bruised, begin to question why they were sent here at all. By December, the campaign is called off. The army retreats, leaving the farmers to fight their own battles. The emus, unbothered, continue to thunder across the fields. In this strange war, the victor is clear, but the humiliation lingers. Why does this bizarre war still symbolize human arrogance against nature? Because the Emu War was never really about birds. It was about people. Politicians who believed they could command nature as easily as they commanded men. Soldiers who thought firepower alone would bring victory. Farmers who prayed for salvation through guns instead of solutions. Nature, indifferent and relentless, had other plans. The story lives on because it is more than a punchline. It is a parable, a reminder that not all enemies can be subdued with weapons, that sometimes human pride creates its own downfall. The emus, unknowing, became symbols. They represent every time humankind has overestimated its power, every moment we thought the world would bend to our will. And instead, the world laughed. In the Western Australian scrub, the sun dips low. The soldiers pack their gear, their mission abandoned. The birds still roam free, tall silhouettes against the horizon. The Great Emu War is over. The emus have won. And the legend begins. Part comedy, part cautionary tale, forever etched into history as the war no one should have fought. The gates of the workhouse. It is a cold morning in 1842. Frost clings to the cobblestones as a thin gray mist curls over the streets of London. At the gate of a looming stone building, a widow stands with her 2 children. Her shawl is threadbare, her shoes cracked. The boy clutches her skirt. The little girl buries her face in her hands. A clerk with a ledger under his arm barks at them to move forward. The iron gates creak open. They step inside. What happens to families once they step inside? The intake hall is damp, the air heavy with the smell of bleach and boiled cabbage. A row of benches holds other new arrivals. Men with hollow eyes, women clutching infants, children who do not speak. The clerk's quill scratches across the page, reducing the family to names, ages, and numbers. Their possessions are stripped away. A scarf, a toy, even a wedding ring, confiscated. The mother pleads softly, but the clerk does not look up. A matron steps forward. The children are pulled from their mother's arms. She cries out, but the guard shoves her aside. The boy's hand slips from hers. The girl screams. The sound echoes against the stone walls as heavy doors close between them. The widow is led one way, the children another. The boy is taken to a room where older men wait with clippers. His hair falls in clumps to the floor. Cold water is poured over him, stinging his skin. He shivers in silence as lice are scrubbed away. A rough uniform is shoved into his arms, coarse gray fabric that smells of dust and sweat. His old clothes vanish into a basket, never to be seen again. In another hall, his mother undergoes the same ritual, her hair hacked short, her clothes taken, her name crossed out in the ledger and replaced with a number. For the poor, the workhouse does not offer shelter, it offers erasure. The boy is marched down a corridor lined with locked doors. Inside, he glimpses long rows of narrow beds, bodies curled under thin blankets. The sound of coughing drifts through the hall, mingling with the rattle of keys. At the end of the corridor, a heavy door slams shut behind him. Was this really meant as help, or was it punishment for being poor? The workhouse was created, officials claimed, to provide relief. But in truth, it was built to deter. Poverty was seen as weakness, even sin. Conditions were made harsh deliberately to discourage all but the most desperate from seeking aid. Families were split apart. Silence was enforced. Food was meager. Work was endless. For the widow and her children, there will be no comfort here. Only discipline. Only labor. That night, in the cavernous dining hall, the boy is handed a tin spoon and a bowl of thin soup. He stares at the pale liquid, its surface broken by a single piece of potato. Around him, other children eat in silence, their spoons clattering softly against the bowls. He looks down at his portion, then around the hall with its stone walls and barred windows. The realization settles in. This place is not a refuge. It is a prison disguised as charity. This, he understands, is home now. Life and death behind the walls. The boy hunches over a wooden bench. His small fingers grip a needle, pulling coarse thread through rough fabric again and again. Blood stains the tips, but he dares not stop. Beside him, rows of children bend over their work, their eyes heavy, their movements slow. At the far end of the hall, an overseer paces with a cane. Any pause, any mistake, and the stick comes down. In another part of the workhouse, women crush bones with hammers, the dust choking their lungs. The powder is bagged and sold as fertilizer. In the laundry, steam rises from vats of boiling water, and women scrub until their hands blister and peel. How did anyone survive this relentless grind? Food is meager. Twice a day, the inmates gather in silence to receive their rations. Thin gruel, a scrap of bread, sometimes a potato. Meat is rare. Hunger gnaws constantly, twisting stomachs and hollowing faces. Children whisper at night of roasted chickens and steaming pies, but in the morning, they wake to the same gray broth. Disease spreads easily in the dormitories. Dozens of beds line each wall, bodies packed tightly together. The air smells of sweat, damp straw, and sickness. Coughs echo through the night, followed by silence as another child fails to rise in the morning. Smallpox scars faces, typhus drains life quietly. The graveyard behind the workhouse grows steadily, row after row of wooden crosses. Punishment is swift. A girl who whispers to her sister during work is forced to stand for hours without food. A boy caught hiding a crust of bread is whipped until his back runs red. Silence, obedience, and toil are the rules. Mercy is not. Yet now and then, a stranger enters, a reformer, a journalist, someone curious enough to look behind the high stone walls. One man slips into the workhouse under cover of inspection. He watches the children bend over their stitching, their hands raw. He sees women bent double, crushing bones like machines. He smells the stench of the dormitories where the sick lie side by side with the healthy. He is shocked. He writes of what he has seen: hunger, cruelty, despair. His words reach the outside world, printed in papers and pamphlets. Readers recoil. Politicians debate, but little changes. Would the truth ever reach the outside world? And if it did, would anything change? For the inmates, change feels impossible. Days bleed into weeks, weeks into years. The work never ends. Childhood slips away behind locked doors. Mothers grow old before their time. Men waste into shadows of themselves. The system was meant to deter the poor, to make life inside so harsh that no one would willingly enter. In that, it succeeded. But for those who had no choice, the widow, the orphan, the unemployed laborer, it was less a refuge and more a slow death sentence. One night, the boy lies in his narrow bed, listening to the sound of coughing and rattling breaths around him. He clutches his spoon to his chest, the only thing that is truly his. In the darkness, he wonders if he will ever leave. For thousands who entered the workhouse, the question was the same. Was this a place to live or a place to die slowly?